My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. It is time for us to tell our own stories, and I'm here to do just that. Welcome to the Sip My Thoughts podcast, where Black Southern culture resides. Welcome back to the Sip My Thoughts podcast. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for all the support that you've shown the podcast so far. This is episode 47, and my guest will be Antong Lucky. Antong is on a path of redemption. He has come from backgrounds that most young black men have unfortunately frequented. And he's found a way outside of those circumstances to provide not only a different path for himself, but now his work is pretty much centered on focusing on rescuing and showing other young black men that there is a way outside of the circumstances that they might have experienced while they were growing up. And maybe they're still in that cycle of circumstances. So Antong is taking an approach that he is trying to impart on young black men in order to rescue us, and just let us know that there's a different path out there that we can take. So in this podcast, you will hear a lot about his story, a lot of gems that he's dropping, and how he's having an immense effect on not only young black youth here in Dallas, Texas, but also any black youth that he comes into contact with. So really dope episode here. I had to re-record this because I had some audio issues. So the episode will pick up right when I ask him, who is Antong Lucky, and he'll go into depth more so about his story, and the podcast should flow smoothly from there. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Sip My Thoughts. Some of my podcasts have been recorded, and you can watch them on there as well. Also, I'm on every streaming platform that you can possibly think of where my podcast can be found. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Audible. I'm everywhere. So even on social media, you can follow me at Sip My Thoughts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I also created a podcast page on Instagram as well, and it's the Sip My Thoughts pod. So please be sure to tap in with me. Let me know what you think. I really want to know what you guys think about the pod. I mean, obviously I check out the ratings and things like that, but tap in with me on social media. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to hear. Is there anything I can do differently? Any critiques that you just have, let me know. All right, appreciate y'all. Tap in.
All right, so let me take you back. Because I am a father, I'm a spiritual individual, and I'm someone who believes in redemption and transformation for all people. I really believe and breathe, that principle of redemption and transformation. But let me just tell you a little bit about my story, and I promise I'm going to be fast. And I'm not trying to be cool either, man. I just got bags up under my eyes, so that's why I got my shades on, man. I stayed up last night reading this sister book, I'm an abolitionist, Derek Purnell's. Welcome back to the that I'm definitely gonna meet, and so I stayed up, man. My eyes puffy.
No, but, you good.
Yeah, I don't want people to think I'm being arrogant or too cool. I'm just protecting my eyes.
No, you good.
But man, I was born and raised in East Dallas, South Dallas, but it's East Dallas to the local and Fraser Court projects. To a single parent, to all of the statistics that most people and most scientists study, I had those. My mother, single parent on welfare, worked hard, long hours. My father, at 9-month-old, was sentenced to prison. I was a kid that grew up trying to figure out who I was in life. And so with my father not being there and my mother closed that chapter of her life, I was left to the neighborhood to figure out who I was. So I applied myself in school. I put a lot of my effort in school. And I'm going to tell you why I do this. I put a lot of my effort into school. I was a straight A on the road student, talented and gifted student, and I just love learning, education, and I love people. But I had faced something in my earlier years, which was neighborhoods and other kids who would just fight, who would just had this idea that, and most of these kids I learned were coming out of households just like mine, coming out of under-resourced communities just like mine, who had mothers who were working long hours just like mine, and we were just trying to find ourselves. Our fathers wasn't in the picture, most of my friends. And so some kind of way we had this idea where it was just about being tough, being the baddest, et cetera, et cetera. Survival was the name of the game. So most kids that grew up in urban communities was about survival. You learn to jump on somebody, you learn to dislike somebody. You learned that earlier because we didn't have no one. I left off talking about how growing up in a neighborhood, and we grew up as much as I had creativity, as much as I was an A on the road student, a talented, gifted student, I had to make a choice as it relates to my neighborhood. Like in most urban neighborhoods, it's about survival. And so I had to make a choice. I was fighting kids who stayed 1 mile down the block from me, who you would have thought this was like Palestine and Israel, in Lebanon, fight, because we just had this visceral hate for each other. And I never could understand. And so when they started busing us to different schools, the erosion, the empathy started to erode for me. I really love people, like people, love bringing good grades home to my grandmother, but every day I had to fight. And my day depended on if I caught the bus, or if I missed the bus, how fast I could run or how hard I could fight. That became my day. And so after a while as a kid and not having a positive mentor, a positive role model, or not just having your own father in your life, present a lot of challenges for most kids in our community. And me, like most kids, I succumbed to the neighborhood influences in my environment. It was no longer about me bringing home good grades. I started saying, I got to be tough. I'm going to survive out here. My mama kept saying, go to school, get your grades, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm trying to tell my mom, it's tough out here. These kids mean out here. They fight out here. And they picking up guns out here. And so at some point in my life, we started a gang, me and my friend. We started one of the first blood gangs in Dallas. At a time there wasn't no such thing as blood gang, because we were getting picked on by kids who had identified with Crips. And so after the bullying from that, we just said, you know what, we're going to be blood. And that was a choice we made. And we said we're going to be the roughest, toughest gang in the city. And we definitely did that. As a kid, I did a lot of stuff, man, that I'm not proud of, that it was only the grace of God that I was able to survive stuff that I've been through, from the drive-bys, the shootings, the loss of home, friends, to the graveyard, the loss of friends, to the prison system, for this idea. Until one day, man, I was standing in front of a judge, expecting to go home, and that judge told me that I was a menace to society, and he sentenced me to prison.
If you could, can you elaborate on this story? I remember when me and you just discussed it first, but they need to know the bare, like everything, all of the details of your story. I would really like for you to go in depth with that.
Because in 1995, leading up to that story, 1995, from 1993 to 1995, on file and on record was some of the deadliest years in terms of gang banging. Some I'm not proud of, and we were definitely a part of that, right? And it culminated with the FBI raid in our neighborhood, and they arrested 48 people out of my neighborhood. I missed that indictment by a little bit, just by a little chin. I missed that indictment, and they sent out all my friends went to federal prison, and it left the streets dry. So I started selling drugs, had drug houses, and was making a lot of money. I was really making a lot of money selling drugs. Had 5 or 6 cars, et cetera, et cetera. And so but I rose and ranked to where I wasn't actually selling drugs no more, but I had houses, right? I had drug houses all over the city. that I wasn't selling drugs. And one day, I went to go pick up some money from one of my houses, and the police raided. And the police knew that it was the opportunity for them to arrest me, because they couldn't arrest me because I wasn't touching no drugs. And they did. They put the drugs on me, and I ended up going to court for it. The guy that would work for me, he owned up to the drugs then, because they actually wanted my drugs. They were his drugs, but I was picking up the money for my drug. Just give you a little background on that. So I hired an attorney, went to court, man. I remember going down to the courthouse every day, because I couldn't understand how these officers, veteran narcotic officers, were going to say these were my drugs. Now, I understand I was doing it wrong, Brother Tyler, but those weren't my drugs. You know, those are his drugs. He took up for it, but they were saying, see, because we grew up in this era where the police officers that worked our neighborhoods and our community, they were more crooked than the drug dealers that were selling drugs. Mm-hmm. And they believe, I never could respect an officer who would break the law just to enforce the law. Mm-hmm. It don't make sense. Mm-hmm. You can't break the law to enforce the law. It just don't make sense. And so still to this day, I could never get that. And so these officers put the drugs on me and said they were mine. And they were willing to lie under oath and say those were my drugs. And so I remember, man, I was 19 years old. Man, I was going down to the courthouse, just sitting in the back of the courtroom, listening to drug cases, right? That's how smart I was. You know, at 19, when I got busted, I was going down to the drug court, listening to how they prosecute drug cases. Because legally, I was innocent. Those weren't my drugs. Mm-hmm. I was coming to pick up mine. Those were his drugs. He said those are my drugs. But I knew that they could railroad me. I knew that they could put me in the system. These officers sending me to prison. And so I watched how they did it. Each day it would be, I sat in the back of the courtroom, it would be a black kid charged, a white DA, an all-white jury, a white judge, and then a guilty sentence. Each time, every time, they would bring in a white drug expert who would talk to the jury on what the drug game was about. And this guy would break it down to the smallest chromosome. He would break it down. And then at the end result, that kid gets sent to prison. And I saw that, man. I was 19 years old. And I just saw that play over and over and over again, right? To the point that when it was time for me to go to trial, I had a white attorney, which that's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that on another show. But I had an attorney who took my money and told me at the beginning of this process that because they want my drugs and because we had affidavits from everybody out there that those weren't his drugs he just pulled up, that I would beat that case. And when I was getting ready to pick my jury trial, because the judge told us it was time for us to make something happen, we couldn't put it off, I asked my lawyer, because I had a friend who was going to court who was actually in trial in the next courtroom, who was charged with the same thing I was, and he had another officer who had framed him, because we were talking about it, right? He was from a different neighborhood. Black officers, may I add, I want to add that too, black officers that was framing him. And while they was going to trial and I was picking my jury trial, his whole family busted out the courtroom, and they were screaming and hollering. And so it prompted me to ask one of his brothers, like, what happened? And he said, man, they just gave him 20 years. I was like, whoa. Because me and him had been talking about the similarities of our case. Mm-hmm. You know, that we got two officers that's trying to frame us. When he said 20 years, I was like, whoa. You got to understand, May 7th, my daughter was born, my first child was born May 7th. This is May 21st. So I told my lawyer, I said, man, look, I ain't never been in trouble having a duck, no felonies. I said, go get me probation, like most black men do in these kind of situations. They clear out, even when they're innocent. And so I told my white lawyer, I said, and I'm emphasizing white because just the dynamics. Mm-hmm. I said, go in there That's how brainwashed I was. I got a life attorney thinking he could help me. And so he go in there. I asked him. When they said 20 years, I was like, whoa. So it made me ask my lawyer. I wanted to hear what he had been telling me, that I'm good, that we got this. And this lawyer told me in 1997, he said, well, Antong, he said, more than likely you're going to have an all-white jury because the DA is going to strike all the black African Americans. He said, you're going to have a white prosecutor and a white judge. And they're not going to be able to identify with you because they don't live in the hood. He said, so it's a 50-50 chance. And I was like, whoa. And so when I was at that point where I couldn't do nothing because I couldn't fire him, I said, go give me probation, man. I knew I should get probation for this. I didn't even do this. Go give me probation. And that judge, when I was standing in front of that judge, expecting probation, he told me I was a menace to society and he's coming to prison. He sentenced me to TDC, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. But it was at that moment when he sentenced me that I had this epiphany happen in my head while I was standing there, numb, because it seemed like the words rolled off so slow. And I was saying to myself, like, how in the hell did you go from a talented and gifted student to being called a menace to society? I had that thought. And I was standing there as the judge was sentencing me. I had this conversation going on in my head, Brother Kyle. I was saying, but Judge, you don't understand. In the hood, it's a difference. Like, that's not really who I am. Like, I'm really a good kid, but in the hood, you can't be good. You can't be soft. You got to be tough because that's the culture. I'm having this dialogue in my head, but it's never coming out of my mouth. And so, as they led me back to the holding cell, I became very introspective. Something happened to me at that moment. I began to think, right, because on one hand, I was nervous and kind of fearful that I'm going to prison. And all those things you heard about prison, right? All my uncles and everybody who's been, I'm fearful. Because I know now it's fighting, it's this, it's that. And then I'm thinking about this at the same time. I'm saying, this judge just called me a menace to society. And here I am, got butterflies in my stomach and afraid to go to prison. You feel me? Mm-hmm. So that stuff made me start thinking, right? So I started tracking, like, how did I get in this position? Like, at what point did my empathy erode to the point that I just started tracking this stuff. And a lot of the stuff that I tracked back to not having a father, not having a mentor. My mother was working long hours, the under-resourced community, the collective of other young African-American boys like me in that experience just trying to find our way. I just started thinking about everything that was happening and how it happened, man. I started thinking about that. And then luckily for me, in prison, I met a mentor who saw something in me. He approached me, and his exact words to me were, he said, little brother, he said, man, I've been paying attention to you, and all these brothers in this prison, they falling out of place to come see you. They do whatever you ask them to do. You know, they break their neck, they tell you to talk at the chow hall, the rec court, et cetera, et cetera. He said, look, brother, if you can lead these brothers to do wrong, he said, you got the same ability to lead them to do right. He said, you're a leader. And there were some words I had never heard. You know, I had never heard those words before, right? Yeah. But they resonated with me, with something in me. Something in me made me attracted to what he had said, right? Mm-hmm. And so this brother began to give me books in prison, right, to read, and make me read these books, and I would read them. And Brother Tyler, I began to just read because I started realizing what I didn't know. This is 1997. I started reading like Malcolm X, the autobiography, and I was fascinated with Malcolm and his transformation. I started reading Before the Mayflower, the Ron Bennett book. I started reading The Falsification of the African American Conscience by Amos Wilson, and The Community of Self by Naeem Akbar. All these books that dealt with black consciousness and black thought. And I was intrigued by the fact that I didn't know none of that. You feel me? I mean, I ain't gonna say I was intrigued, but I was moved by the fact that I didn't know none of that. You know, I realized in prison how much I didn't know about myself and how much I didn't know about my people, where we came from. They didn't teach us that in school.
Right.
So all this knowledge that I'm getting about the greats in Africa and who we are as a people came through my own studying in prison. And so I started reading everything under the sun, and quickly I started teaching in prison. You know, I made prison become college for me, and I became friends with the librarian. I read everything to the point that I started teaching at, I think I was probably 20 years old, and I was teaching grown men. I'm talking about grown men. I was taking in so much knowledge and practicing so much discipline that I began teaching grown men who would seek me out for my knowledge, right? And so that's who I became in prison. I became that guy. I mean, I denounced my gang in prison because ultimately what I realized was that it was a lot of young men who were in prison who were just like me, who didn't have a father, who wasn't exposed to education, who came from neighborhoods that were under-resourced, et cetera, mother work, long job, and a combination of dropping out of school and everything else led us to prison. It had a direct correlation. So I began to teach the brothers in prison about that correlation. Mm-hmm. Like, look, bro, you're spending too much time trying to get out, that you're not working on what brought you in here. That you're not working on family and being accountable. You arguing with the officers, but the officers just doing their job. We have to figure out, how do we work on what got us in here? How do we work on our character? And I began to teach that in prison, Brother Tyler. And I was a youngster just teaching it because this knowledge was just had me, you know, on this level, right? So I was teaching this. These brothers was coming, wanting to be around me. And what I've seen was that we had a lot of things in common. And all these brothers who had identified with different gangs, I was bringing them to the table, saying, with this message, and saying that we had a responsibility to the young people that's out in the community that's following in our footsteps. We got to break the cycle. And so that's who I became in prison. And then I saw this brother on TV in my neighborhood, Bishop Omar Jawad. His name was Omar Jawad. He was with my cousins, and they were doing some gang intervention stuff in 1999. And I wrote a letter to my cousin and saying, because they didn't know what I was doing in prison. And I said, whoever that brother is, connect me to him. Not knowing that they were saying, you're going to have to meet our cousin that's in prison. And so, and I remember when I got ready to leave prison, the brothers told me, and it was funny because the brothers told me, they said, Lucky, man, you got an X on your back. It's hard for felons in the free world. There's no opportunities. You can't get no job, apartment, et cetera. You ain't gonna be able to get no opportunity. And I remember, man, and I meant this. I told those brothers, I said, well, it's the X is what keeps me out of opportunities. My job when I get out of here is to make the X be what gives me opportunity.
Absolutely.
I left on that note. I left on the note that we as men had a responsibility to our community, that we had to step up and stop the violence that was happening in our community. We have to be the men of our community. We have to protect the young people in our community. That we had to break the cycle of violence and the trajectory of prison. We had to stop making prison be the rites of passage for young people in our neighborhood, because I knew young people in our neighborhood were just like me, who had gifts, who were smart, just as smart as any other kid, but their gifts oftentimes get smothered because they trying to fit in to a culture that only screws them up and spit them out. Mm-hmm. And only someone who's been through that can stand as a sign or as a bridge for young people to say, let me take your hand and walk you through this dangerous terrain. And so for the last 22 years, my life has been about how can I take first those young men who are in the community who are just like me, because fatherless kids who don't have no mentors, no role models. How do we cultivate? How do we lead them? Then how do we cultivate mentors for their fathers who were sent to prison 10 and 20 years? How do we create an avenue for them to come back and take their rightful place in the community? Because we do know the kids are emulating and mimicking what they see in their community. So if we can change the character of the men, then their characteristics have a market advantage in terms of changing the trajectory of the kids. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So my life has been, how do we do that? How do we make the ones that's been marginalized by the 1994 crime bill? How do we, once we know that was wrong in mass incarceration, how do we utilize those individuals and not see them as a problem, but see them as the solution to the problem that's happening in the community? And so I've spent my life doing that. I even wrote a book. It's called Redemptive Path Forward on Amazon that's being released in May. And it's the chronicling of that journey of someone as myself, from a kid who had a lot of talent, who yielded to the influences, who went to prison, who did a 360 turnaround and said, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to making sure that young people don't have to make that choice that I chose. And so that's kind of been the work that we've done with the organization Urban Specialists around the country. We have been catalyzing, bringing together different individuals, saying, it's not about us. How can we empower you to be responsible for your community? How can we take the brother that's coming out of Pleasant Grove that did 20 years from Pleasant Grove, or the brother that came coming out of Oak Cliff who did 20 years representing Oak Cliff, to say to him, look, brother, you got a value. You got a responsibility to these young people. And if we can show you no value, then you can show up in the lives of these young people, and then you can prevent some little brother from making a mistake that you made. That's the essence of what we do, and that's the essence of what we've been doing for the last 20-some years.
When you talk about trying to get the young brothers to see the value in themselves, I just think about the fact that, there aren't a lot of, I think, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and I was talking to someone earlier, and just thinking about, like I said, with me being from Jackson, Mississippi, for an example, right? Like, I can't really think of anyone that I really looked up to, like somebody that, made some type of impact on my life outside of my parents and, everything that they instilled in me. But even when you have parents, like, and I think me and you talked about this, briefly the last time that we spoke. I think one of the things that what Nipsey said originally when he did an interview with Hot 97, he was just talking about, him being a gang member, and he was just elaborating on the fact that, naturally, that's not who he was. But
Right.
He was talking about the fact that when you walk outside, you're influenced by, your environment and everything that you're surrounded by. And like I said, just for me personally, I can't think of anybody outside of my parents who really had like a positive impact on my life. So when you're going out into these communities, obviously the community that you're from also, but when you step foot in other communities and you're trying to have that impact on these other young brothers, you might be the only positive role model. Now, initially, this is their first time meeting you, so they're getting to learn more about you. But I just think in our communities, there aren't a lot of people within our communities that we can look up to, or someone who's had that effect, on our lives. So when you're talking about, changing these young brothers' lives and showing them that there are, better ways to go about doing things outside of what it is that they're doing, it's how are you? Do you think that you're getting through to them? Are they retaining what it is that you're giving to them?
Oh yeah, man. Let me tell you something, brother Tyler. When I first got out of prison, I'm gonna give you a story. When I first got out of prison, right? I got out of prison when I met brother Omar. When I got out of prison, I was so pumped on going back to my neighborhood and rectifying all of the stuff that I had a hand in destroying, right? I was pumped about that. You couldn't tell me that wasn't what I was about to do. And so when I met Omar, right, this brother was 3 years older than me, one of the smartest individuals I ever met in my life. This brother, man, I felt like I was walking with Dr. King, rest his soul. Mm-hmm. This is how smart this brother was, and how much knowledge and love and compassion that he had for our people and our communities, right? I've never met anybody as powerful. I think God blessed me, putting me in the path for that brother, and that brother being my mentor for 20 years outside of prison, right? But when I met him, right, and I was pumped about my neighborhood, the first thing he said to me was, let's go over to your enemy neighborhood and ask them for permission to work with the young people in their community. And I remember me at the time, year 2000. I said, hold up, bro. I said, man, what you talking about? I said, I hadn't thought that far. I said, oh no, I'm changed. But I said, but that's suicide. You telling me to go fresh out of prison, you telling me to go to those dudes that I was shooting at, that was shooting at me in their neighborhood, unarmed, and ask them for permission? I said, you gonna get us both killed. Right. But he convinced me, right? He convinced me, and I'm not gonna front like I was with that plan, like I was a part of that. He literally drugged me to be a part of that, because I was fighting it tooth and nail. Right. I went in that neighborhood, right? I trusted him, and I went in that neighborhood. We were looking for some of my enemies, rivals who were OGs, and some people told us where they was, right? And I never forget. We went to this house. We knocked on the door. It was apartments, regular apartments, and all you heard was guns. They looked out the window first, and then all you heard was guns clacking. And my heart must have skipped 5 beats, right? Right. And Omar said, you got to understand, I didn't know Omar at the time. I just met him. Right. And he looked like a college student, no swag, no nothing. Yeah. Right? So he said, put your hands up. He said, put your hands up, hurry up. So I put my hands up. And man, I remember it was hot. It was hot that day. It's hot in the sun. And I said, I closed my eyes and I said, God, I know you ain't finna let them kill me right now. I know you didn't bring me this far to let them kill me right now. Right. I'm praying. I got my hands up praying, man. And them brothers snatched the door open, man. They had them guns pointed at us, man. And Omar started talking, right? And he was asking the brothers for permission to work with their young people and saying that, man, we can't continue to kill each other, man, and we can't continue to allow our babies to have the trajectory of death in prison. That's the only option that some got to give. And he was talking, right? And man, while he was talking, these brothers, they were mugging. But as he was talking, they were lowering their guns, bro. This is by God truth. And I remember in my head saying, bro, keep talking, don't stop. Keep talking. We got him, And at the end of that process, right? And he said, man, this brother come over. He was talking about me. He said, this brother come over in peace. He has changed his life. He come over in peace. And he asked him for forgiveness, et cetera, et cetera. And so the gang leader at the time for them was this guy named Grover, man. He said, okay. And then weeks later, maybe a month later, he joined us, man. And we began to work in my neighborhood and the neighborhood that had this long history of rival beef, killing each other back and forth. And I would say to your question, man, a lot of those young people who were 16, 17, 18 back then, they grown men now. They 30, 35, et cetera, et cetera. And to this day, I got relationships with them. And not just them, other young people in other neighborhoods across the country and across the city, because I think, and what I know, I ain't gonna say I think, but what I know is most people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. So when you coming into these communities, if you really care and you really about our people, I don't care where you come from, what gang you used to be a part of, or what your past is, people gonna automatically draw. They're gonna automatically draw to that. And I think one of the biggest myths in urban culture is that these young people don't want what we got to offer. because we look at them and we have allowed the media to judge these young people harshly based on how they look and based on some behavior of some of them, to where we believe the perception that the media then placed on these young people that they fall. It's the same thing that happened when Joe Biden then was doing the super predator deal. They came out with these terms and these labels, and we as black people brought into that too. And as a result, those young men and fathers were stretched out our neighborhoods that did 20 and 30 years. Some just still getting out today because we bought into that idea. But I'm telling you, that's not the truth, man. What I found was that these young, I don't care how many tattoos they got, I don't care if they pants sagging, I don't care what the case, how they outer appearance look. What I found is that when you show these young people you cure, man, you can change the trajectory of their lives, man. But you can't be scared of them. You gotta come with them with love, man. All they missing is love. You gotta think about it. These kids are growing up just like me. My mama was working long hours, so she couldn't give me the love because she was tired when she got in. My dad is nowhere to be in play, and that's the situation for everybody. So you got kids growing up that ain't never been nurtured, ain't never been told they love, ain't never been told they're a leader, like that brother told me, that when those words hit us, they resonate. Same thing with these young people. Those words resonate, and that's what they're looking for. And any men, women who love our community enough to do that, man, you gonna change. It's nothing like, Brother Tyler, having young people, and I get this all the time, man. I need to start talking about it more. But I get young people who I've come in contact with, who I've helped along the way because we had juvenile programs, we worked in the schools, and these young people that I loved on them for real, who come to me 10 and 15 years later and say, Mr. Lucky, and they'll tell me where they at in life. And I'm proud of them. But they'll let me understand that, Mr. Lucky, I'm in this position because of you. Do you not remember the conversation that you had? And they can pinpoint the date, the time that we had conversation. I got a brother right now, he's a little Hispanic kid. He in the army. He a high rank in the army. And reached out to me and he was bragging about what he was doing and married and his family and his daughter and his house he just bought. But at the end of that conversation, he said, Mr. Lucky, you know I'm in the army because on that bus ride home, you told me I needed to get out of my neighborhood because my neighborhood was going to take me under and that the army was going to pay for my education and expose me to the world. He said, that's why I got enlisted. Mm-hmm. See, they know like these stories right there, and I got a lot of them like that. But it's because you love. I think we as a people, we have to begin to love our people beyond those outwardly labels and stuff that we see that we judge that's not judging based on the inside. If we can get past that, man, and show up in communities, man, that's our mission. Man, we'll change the trajectory of our community. We'll change it, man. So my mission is to those kids in those communities and those brothers and sisters that's coming out of prison. I'm saying to the kids, let me walk you through this, because I've been there. And I'm saying to the brothers and the sisters coming out of prison, let me tell you something. They might told you on your way out that you're ex-offender, you ain't got no opportunity. But that don't mean that you can really become a fixated example in your community, that if your character change, your characteristics have a market advantage. And I explained that to them. And when they get that, man, it's nothing like seeing people who thought that they was written out, that they didn't have no opportunity, then begin to be like, I got a sister that's in her community, killing it, entrepreneur, knocking down the door. But she would have never thought that if nobody had opened the door and showed her the way. And for me, it's never about me, Brother Tyler. We got to always be about helping somebody else. Because if I help you get on, guess what? If I ever fall off, I bet you're going to help me because you're going to say he helped me get on. And if we can get our community to start thinking about all too often, you know, we think it's all about us, and we try to hoard it and all that good stuff. No, it's about principal entrepreneurship, is investing in people. Not I'm going to invest in you. I want to see you succeed. If we can put that idea and burst that idea in our communities, man, boy, man.
Definitely. Definitely.
We can get there, but man, we all win.
Definitely.
Each one teach one.
Definitely. It's interesting that you say that. I was watching a clip from Nick Saban, who's Alabama's head football coach, earlier, and when you were talking about the tendency for us to just throw our people away, throw our children away, and things like that, Nick Saban was actually talking about he used to be the coach of Michigan State way back when, and he had a player that did something, and he suspended the player. He had the player doing like disciplinary type things in order, to get back to playing status and things like that. And after he did that, he was just talking about how the media just excoriated, the young man. Talked about him, said how he should no longer be on the football team and things like that. And the guy eventually got back on the football team, played in the NFL for 15 years, and once his playing career was over, he just talked about the successes that the guy experienced. Had 7 children, and his oldest daughter was a student at Harvard, and he was a CEO of a business at this particular point in time. So, I think we definitely have a tendency to just write our young people off. Not knowing that, sometimes, our paths might not have been similar, but our paths have been riddled with hardships and things like that. And sometimes you just, a lot of our young people, they just end up in situations where they just can't see an out, even though there might be an out there for them. So that when you said that immediately made me think about the Nick Saban clip that I saw earlier. So you get out, you start hitting the pavement, trying to change people's lives, and along the way, I'm sure some people changed your life as well. So could you talk a little bit about the people who had an impact on you also?
Man, I've been blessed to have the mentors and the people that's been in my word. I've been blessed. Like I said, Bishop Omar, Willie Ray Fleming was my prison mentor. He was a godsend who really instilled in me the discipline and to understand myself, et cetera, et cetera. And then I met Bishop Omar. I met Omar Jawaki fan Bishop. He became a bishop before he passed. But I met Bishop Omar when I first got out. And man, through this brother, I was able to come in contact with some brothers. Man, we had a circle of king of brothers, from all different here though. You know what I'm saying? Not just, there's not just African American. I was exposed to people who had the right heart. Who had the right, from wealthy to average. And one thing I always did was I always allowed those who had my best interests at heart to mentor me. Too often we feel that we can't nobody tell us nothing. We too smart. We know everything. I never took that route. I always allowed, even when people told me stuff that I already knew, I allowed people the pleasure of feeling like they were imparting it to me. In most cases, they was. So I was privileged to have a bunch of mentors. It's too long of a list to name people, to name them all. I was privileged enough to meet Bishop. I was privileged enough to meet this guy, civil rights leader in D.C., Bob Woodson, Deion Sanders, of course. These are people that Dr. Marcus Martin, all of Don Williams, Harlem Crow. These are all the people who have been in my circle, man, that always kept me on a straight path. And so it's a long list of them, brother, that poured into me, man, because I allowed them to pour into me. I really yielded myself because I wanted to grow. I wanted to, I believe that you have to have those people that's in your circle that are smarter than you, that want to see you grow. They not challenged or they not threatened by your growth. So that's what they implanted. They implanted it in me. Always each one reach one and teach one till we all talk. That's the message that they gave me. So I was always taking what they were pouring into me, and I would pour it right back out into somebody else. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so we created this kind of circle of where we mentored and we shared information, earn, sharpen, earn kind of situation. You know, we used to have some good knock down, drag them out debates, everything, but it was about debating the ideas. It was never about attacking the person. And so we challenged each other to be great, to be smart. Even to this day, man, I'm an avid reader. Man, I order probably 2 or 3 books a week, you know, because it's always about elevating our mind. You can never get comfortable, you know. And I want to show young people who were just like me in those neighborhoods that a lot of the things that you want, that you see, you can have those things. There's not nothing bad about it, but it's certain ways, it's certain processes and certain principles that you have to apply to get it. You can get the same thing, and you don't have to be looking over your back, looking over your shoulder, worried about somebody coming to take it from you. We got to show, me and you, brother, got to show these brothers that it's success, because we name what the success is. It's success, and it's wealth, it's all that in doing the right thing. You know, so I'm an advocate of doing the right thing, being in legal, entrepreneurship, all that stuff. We got to unlock this in brothers to show them it's a different way. And then we got to educate the other people that this brother or this sister is worthy of a shot. You know, that they worthy of a shot. You know, and that's kind of like twofold, man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you also have a book coming out, and you also coined a new term of activism as well. So if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that's super important as well.
Yes, man. I have first of all, my book is a Redemptive Path on Amazon. Y'all got to go check that out. I promise you, when you go look at that book, you buy that book, and you read that book is going to bless your soul. I really believe that. You know, I really took a lot of time to write that book, and I was very transparently honest about my situations, you know, and you know, I laid it out on the line. But I do believe that in reading that book, you're going to find something for you that's going to help you, because I wrote it that way. I wrote it in a way that I wanted to share as it was unfolding in my life, the many, many different blessings and challenges that I went through and how I navigated some of those situations. In some situations, I didn't make the right choice. And I say that in the book. I don't spur it. I don't make it seem as though I'm perfect, but I didn't make the right choice. But I walk you through what happened, what I did, what the outcome was, et cetera, so you can see. So we ain't gonna always make the right choices. But I give you my life story from my perspective, the many people that I've come in contact with. That book is a blueprint for anybody who is, you coming out of prison and you want to do the right thing, or you got somebody in prison and you want them to do the right thing, send them that book. Or if you're an institution or organization that's trying to understand how you deal with people who are rising from the ashes, this is the book for you, or it's for yourself. So I wrote it in so many ways that it can benefit everybody. Go get that book. But in that book, I coined this term because it's from incarceration to a life of activism, and it's talking about that. Now my life as an activist, being on the national scene, I coined a term called redemption activism, because I believe that we need this type of activism in our discourse today, because as you know, around the country you see the rift between communities and law enforcement where Black men are seemingly being murdered by police officers. Is that real? Is that myth? Whatever the case may be. All that. We talk about all that in the book. And I talk about the need for us to challenge systems. As people, we got to challenge systems, but we got to do it with love, courage, justice, and compassion. We got to, because all too often conversations now, as it relates to our community, is about left, right, red, blue. You on this side, I'm on that side, and everybody they are dug deep into their positions. Nobody don't want to give up no ground. Mm-hmm. You know, it's our way versus them. And so going at that trajectory, our country is going to go to hell in a handbasket. So we need to employ some different strategies that says, I respect you as a human being, and you respect me as a human being, and where can we find the commonality? What are some of the things that we can work on from that perspective? So, we don't minimize the voices that challenge the system, but we challenge these systems with love, justice, courage, and redemption, because we have to believe that any and everything is worthy of redemption. So if you don't believe that something is worthy of redemption, you're going to condemn it. You could be condemning something to its death that can't rise. If that's the nature of our conversations, we ain't gonna never get nowhere. We have to understand that everything is entitled to this form of redemption, and that's what redemptive activism is about. And I talk a lot about that in the book, so make sure y'all go get the book. But thank you for asking me that, bro.
Yeah, you also told a really interesting story the last time we spoke about. I think you did a training with the police department. Yeah. Could you talk about that a little bit also?
Yeah, man. And my training, and that's interesting, man, because what I didn't say is that growing up in East Dallas, I had a very adversarial relationship with police officers. I mean, tell me, like a real adversarial. Me and the police didn't get along. We had a very adversarial relationship, to say the least. Yeah. And I was at 17 and 18, I was very familiar with internal affairs, because I used to go down to internal affairs and had to file on these officers. It was wicked. It was wicked back then. So I didn't have a good relationship with police. But now I train police officers, right? Which is totally interesting, because most police officers and most unions, they don't let non-police officers train police. So they have this code that they go by, et cetera, et cetera. And so I have a class where I teach police officers how to properly and effectively engage with community. And I don't pull no punches on my training. It's not no sugar coat. We love the police. It's not one of them kind of training. Mm-hmm. By long Chris. It's not that. It's about dealing with the biases, that you have, And so when I do my trainings, I have my assistant go in and put on a projector a picture of me in my white TDC suit. And then I have my bio, gang member, drug dealer, as the teacher, as the facilitator. And so most of these classes are 95% Anglo-American, right, who are being shipped to urban communities. Mm-hmm. And so I got to get them ready for urban communities. And I can't sugarcoat with them. So I let them sit with that picture of me, because I know what it's going to do to their psyche. And by the time 5 minutes pass, I walk in the room, brother, they red as a beet. The tension is so thick, you can cut it with a knife. Yeah. They looking at me like, who in the HE22 pitch is this coming in front of us? and then from the time, say, go, to the time I end, I take my belt off, and boy, I tear they butts up. Yeah. But I do it in a way, though. I do it in a way that by the end of the class, and they got to rate me. They got to take a blind survey. They got to get all that data. By the end of the class, man, and by the surveys, these officers are hugging me in tears, saying, "How can we work together?" Wow. You feel? I come in and the tension is this hot. Yeah. And the hate is flowing hard. But by the time I finish, and I take my belt off, but I don't. One thing I do, one thing that's true for me is I got to get it to you 100. I got to kick it to you real. I can't sugarcoat it, because my people are dying in the streets. Absolutely. So I can't sugarcoat it, which I can't come in there and play like that don't exist. Like some of these killers not questionable, like you don't see it in a certain way. Mm-hmm. I can't come in like that, because I know the police academy teaches you a certain thing. They teaches you to look at somebody of my skin color a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so I can't play with that. So I gotta come in, but I gotta educate them in a way that they can digest what I'm gonna give.
Right.
And so by the end of that class, brother, I promise you not. By the end of that class, those officers are interiors hugging me, saying, "How can they work with me?" And when they give me the surveys, if you see some of the responses that the officers say in terms of my training, now mind you, when I came in, the tension was this high, and the faces were red, it's beats. But at the end of that thing, because I do it in a way that is really about this idea of redemptive activism and challenging the stereotypes that we have in our head. Like I tell them, whether you're an officer with a gun and a badge or a gangster with a gun and a rag, everybody want to go home at the end of the day. And then I tell them that lawlessness, no matter who it land on, cannot be tolerated. So if that's lawlessness on the side of somebody in the community, or if that's lawlessness on the side of a police officer, it can't be tolerated. It got to be called out, because it's no monolithic idea of community. Like, you can't say that's South Dallas and they all bad. If you're a police officer, you think like that, you're going to end up in the news. Or you can't say the whole police department is bad on our part. We can't say the whole police bad, because when you say that, when you blanket statement that with a broad brush, you hurt the individuals who became police officers to become protectors of their community. And so they get swept in that. And that's not fair. And so what that does is numb everybody to action. So nobody want to move because they don't want to they caught up in these schisms. And so we got to stop that. We got to deal with the events that happen on a case-by-case basis without making it. And then you deal with, and if we all saying lawlessness, no matter who it is, can't be tolerated, then you're dealing with the problem as it should be dealt with. And so it's just a lot of stuff that I tell these officers. Like I tell them, in the police academy, you talk that the hand is the threat. So if your hand is moving, that's the threat. I said, but in the urban community, we talk about hands. So how do you mitigate that? If I'm talking to you and I'm moving and you get scared, you get threatened, you're going to kill me. But this is just how I talk. I said, so those kind of conversations that we be having, man, it'd be interesting though, man. I'm telling you, when I finish these classes, bro, it'd be funny, man, because when I come in, you can feel the heat. Yeah. And I don't be intimidated by it. You feel me? I don't be intimidated whatsoever. Right. And I take out my bed and I whoop their butts to the end of the thing, and they all crying and saying they love me, man. And that's just magic, bro. But it's just interesting that somebody like me, with everything I've been through, training police officers, going into the prison system with the police chief, and like I said, man, I ain't been the police's friend, but I'm for what's right. I'm for what's right in our community, and I'm about holding everybody accountable, not just police officers. I believe in holding the people in our community accountable as well. That we have a responsibility to our young people. You know, we have a responsibility. I got a friend, Keegan Bruce, from the streets to the suites. He said, we got to stop giving young people bad game, man. We got to stop doing that. As OG, we can't give them bad game. Definitely. You ain't an OG if you do it. You know what I'm saying? You got to give these kids the right. You got to use what God gave you that experience so you can share it with somebody else. And that your hurt can be that somebody else's medicine, man. That's how we look at it, bro. You know, and we holding people accountable to that. You know, I got another brother, JoJo, with fatherhood over every hood. So I believe in just bringing these brothers together, man, and strengthening the movement. So I appreciate you, brother, for giving me this platform, man, to be able to just talk about this stuff, man. Because I think it's a laundry list of brothers and sisters who got the same story that they don't never get this platform. They don't never get to talk about what they're doing and their transformation. And I applaud you for that, man, because I'm like Maya Angelou. You know, I come as one, but I stand with thousands of people who have this same thought, bro. And so I appreciate you for allowing me to have the platform to sit with you. I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. No problem at all. No problem at all. Like I said, these types of conversations are definitely important to be had. And like I said, there are a bunch of people, you know, in our communities across the country who are doing things like this that you don't necessarily hear about because mainstream media isn't going to highlight these stories all the times and, tell the public there's so much bias and there's so much misinformation that's out there that paints an inaccurate picture of black people. Right. And if you only allow them to tell your story, you're only getting that story from one specific perspective, and you're not getting like a holistic view of everything of our community, who the people in our community are, and the things that we do that doesn't necessarily get the type of attention that it deserves. So yeah, that's definitely what this platform is for. Like, I tell Southern black stories, and like I said, I feel an obligation to amplify our voices specifically, because there are so many people working at news stations and just everywhere that tell our stories, and we don't get a chance to tell our stories the way that they should be. So
that's dope, bro. I just yesterday, man, I did a discussion with the sister and brother, Brittany Barnett. I don't know if you ever heard of Brittany Barnett. She has an organization called Buried Alive. It's a sister right here in Dallas. Wrote a book called Knock Before Midnight, Buried Alive Project. This is a sister. Mm-hmm. I understand what I'm saying. A sister whose mother was in prison, et cetera, come from the hood, but became an attorney, man. And today, she's got over 40, maybe 50 brothers and sisters across this country out of prison who had life sentences, who had death sentences in the federal penal institution. That she from old draconian laws that targeted black people. Probably got a marijuana case and got a life sentence. But she done got over 30, 40 of these individuals out, bro. She is a hero to me. But people like that, you don't hear their stories enough.
Right.
Who are fighting the system. This other brother, Drew Willie, man, he works on the front end for brothers who can't afford defense and counsel, hiring attorneys to work these cases pro bono to prevent people from fleeing out and going to prison. And he saved, and on an average, 10 years per client that could have been sentenced to prison. Right. See, them kind of people, we got to get a platform for them kind of people that step in our community, because we got to continue to educate. Like, what you doing is so important, bro. If ain't nobody ever told it to you, I'm going to tell it to you. What you doing with this is super, super, super duper important. And we all got a part to play. Everybody don't have to have the story that I have. I'm not trying to say that at all. Hopefully you don't get the story. But I'm saying we all have a part to play in the recitation of our neighborhood and reviving our communities, providing opportunity, because it's economic too. We got to address the economic problem. We all got a part to play in it, and I think that when we come together and we all respect each other's role and strength and what we bring to the pot, I just think the impact is maximized. And when we working together, bro, when we all, I'm talking about from media to attorneys, to non-profits, to businesses, when we all working together, bro, man, that's powerful, bro.
Absolutely.
That's powerful.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. So when we started this conversation, I asked you who was Antong Lucky. So I guess to end this conversation, I asked you a same variation of that question. So how is Antong Lucky today in 2022 different from the Antong Lucky who was sentenced to serve time in the mid to late 90s? What's the juxtaposition between the two?
And the difference between that 19, 20-year-old kid versus me is the fact that I'm accountable to my actions. I'm responsible. I'm a father to my three kids. One is not biologically mine, but she's mine. Very responsible. I try to be a role model for them. Every choice that I make, I don't just think about it from my perspective. I think about who's affected by these choices I make. I'm very empathetic towards people, so I definitely like to understand other people. It's not about me. I've really learned to discipline my ego so that I don't let my ego get in the way of choices and decisions that has to be made. I'm very spiritual. I believe that by me helping people, it's a direct correlation to the blessings that I receive. And God has really blessed me tremendously to come from where I came from in that courtroom to where I'm at now. God be telling me, son, get off your knees. Okay, I get it. Because I'm thanking him so much for the blessings and the many things that have happened to me. If I can just point with any words of wisdom to anybody who's going through, I would tell them that going through, don't try to stop them from going through, that growing through builds character. That you have to look at, to be successful or to be at a point in life where you're happy, you have to embrace the tests just as you embrace the bliss. So you can't get one without the other. You know, you have to be able to say the struggle, the roadblocks, the obstacles, you got to embrace that. That's a part of it. That's going to help you appreciate and love when you finally get to the point to where you at that place in your life. It's that you're gonna accept it more when you accept the test. You know, just as God will bless you, he'll test you. And so you got to embrace that. So oftentimes we give up when we embrace some adversary or some hard times or obstacles. We like that little meme where the man digging in the cave and one quit and the other hit all the diamonds. Mm-hmm. We was right there at it, bro. Mm-hmm. We gotta teach our kids, man, that if your mom on crack, your dad in prison, your neighborhood bad, your school don't like you, your friends make fun of you, at the end of the day, you're responsible for what you do for you. At the end of the day, man, that's a part of it. Or if you had a boxing fight and the crowd booing you, and the judges on the other dude's side, and the referee cheating you, and the knock him out. And that's how you got to do life. You got to knock life out. So it ain't no draw. It ain't no unanimous vote. You knock him out, but you knock him out by looking at and embracing the obstacles along the way. Mm-hmm. That's the advice I leave.
All right, that's powerful. I ain't gonna talk too much after that. I ain't gonna belabor it. That's it. Whoever hears that, but that's powerful, man. That's super powerful. And I think a lot of that, again, that's why I wanted to have you on also, because I think a lot of people can relate to your story and just the advice that you gave and just that gem that you dropped at the end. So I'm not gonna belabor it. This has been another episode of the Sip My Thoughts podcast. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Continue to support. Again, let them know where your book is going to be coming out when again?
My book is coming out. It's May the 17th. Make sure you go get it. Hold on. Just turn my phone down. Make sure you go get it on Amazon. A Redemptive Path Forward by Antong Lucky on Amazon. Follow me on all my social media platforms. Antong Speaks. Antong Speaks, but a Redemptive Path Forward. Make sure y'all go get that book. Support a brother. Can y'all support a brother?
That's what it's all about. Again, this is another episode of the Sip My Thoughts podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, again, I'm everywhere on social media, Sip My Thoughts. I also created a podcast page on Instagram, which is the Sip My Thoughts, so THE Sip My Thoughts. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time.